Morning. It is time to get up with the aftermath. After the C's earned another F in a big moment, is it time for an even get to head off to the NBA Finals? Oh, the one and only McNutt is in the house. We'll figure out what is and what isn't McNutt's, and we got a big crew ready to roll with us this morning as well. Take a look. Windy is up early today. Jeremy Fowler gets up with us today. Harry and Ninko are ready to go, and we begin with big questions in Boston after the Celtics' stunning elimination in Game 7 on Monday night. Boston, a big decision to make on Jaylen-Brown's future and whether or not to give him a max extension. I asked Stephen A. Smith about that exactly yesterday. You give him $59 million a year to keep him in
Jaylen-Brown?
Yes.
No. I don't think you give. First of all, I don't think you give him that much. Period, because he's not your number one option. Mm-hmm. That kind of money is reserved for number one.
So then, what if he says to you, either give it to me or I want out?
Well, excuse me. I mean, there's a guy by the name of Damian Lillard in Portland. I wouldn't mind getting somebody like him, who's a closer, by the way, who's a point guard as a closer, who's a sniper. We got all of that stuff going for ourselves if you're Damian Lillard. But Jaylen-Brown, I think the real challenge is that he has aspirations for being that number one guy, and that is never going to happen with Jason Tatum.
Ooh. So the plot thickens this quickly after the season. McNutt, I will start with you. What do you think of what Stephen A. just said about Jaylen-Brown's future in Boston?
I completely disagree with the great Stephen A. I think that the Celtics should keep this core together. This team has not had any continuity at the head coaching position. They've had 3 coaches in 3 years. And when you look at this year's coaching staff, Joe Mazzulla gets promoted, not replaced as far as position, as far as I know. Damon Stoudemire and Will Hardy both leave. Reinforce this coaching staff and run it back. These guys are young. They've been very close. They have an exceptional amount of experience in big-time games at their age. I don't buy it. You add Dame to that team, you fundamentally change this roster. This roster, as constructed, is good enough to win a championship.
All right, let me keep Dame in my back pocket because I will come back to that. But let me stay on this one for a moment here. Will there come a day? I'm asking you to look into the crystal ball. Monica McNutt has a crystal ball. Will there come a day when the two of us are sitting next to each other right here talking about Jaylen-Brown and Jason Tatum having won a championship together in Boston?
I believe so. If they keep this group together, yes. Listen, they got to the finals last year. All the pieces they added were about supporting what they did last year. Derek White was a tremendous addition, all defensive type of guy, terrific shooter. Saw him have some brilliant moments in Game 7, even though it didn't pan out. Malcolm Brogdon won 6th Man of the Year. Now, he was injured in this series, but he did what he was supposed to do. This team got better from last year. The questions were with the coaching staff. Reinforce the coaching staff. Allow these guys to do what they've done. They are young. They still have time. Why do you break up a core in which everybody in the entire league is trying to build?
All right, so McNutt says yes. Stephen A. says no. Let's go to Windy for the answer. What are the Celtics going to do, Brian Windhorst?
Yeah, Greeny, it's a big decision, but it's actually a fairly simple one. You either extend Jaylen-Brown or you trade him. And the issue with trading him is that you will not get good value because once you trade him, he cannot get the Supermax extension, which means he's kind of unlikely to extend. So a team negotiating with the Celtics would potentially be negotiating for a rental. So I'm going to tell you the Celtics have done this arithmetic already, and I think they're headed for signing Jaylen-Brown to that Supermax contract. And then they have a 2-year window before he and Jason Tatum would actually get the big dollars together where they can figure out whether or not this pairing works. It's not the time to make the big decision. I realize that Jaylen-Brown did not look good at the end of this series. I realize that the Celtics missed an opportunity this year to get back to the finals, but it is not the moment to break them up, and I don't think they're headed that direction at all.
Hey, let's just make clear for everyone who is watching, because we've all heard of the sign and trade, right? That's a common occurrence in basketball. Explain to everyone, Windy, as we discussed in our meeting this morning, why that is not on the list of options.
Right. There's 2 things. Number one, once you trade a player in Jaylen-Brown's position, he cannot get the Supermax. The whole entire point of the Supermax is to keep the player put. It's an anti-Kevin Durant move, anti-LeBron James move, leaving their franchises. So you can't get the Supermax if you trade him. Also, as soon as you sign a player to a Supermax, Greeny, you can't trade him for a year. The Celtics are completely aware of all of these things, and I believe all indications are they're going to offer it. He may, think about it for a while. I think he's going to sign it. He won't be traded untouchable for a year, and this is not going to be a topic of conversation for at least a year. Doesn't mean that it won't be a topic of conversation or a big decision 18 months from now. But I understand why people are asking about it, but I think this is more elementary. I think it's not going to be an issue.
All right, so it sounds like that will be run back. But you did mention, or I should say Stephen A. mentioned Damian Lillard, who is a fascinating piece in all of this. And by that, I don't mean just specifically Boston, but his name comes up, it feels like, all the time. So, Windy, I'll start this one with you. And I see it says Celtics on the screen, but I'll put this to almost anyone. Should we be expecting, as a basketball public, Damian Lillard to go from one place to another during this offseason?
Oh, now you've identified something that is a real thing, probably one of the biggest things in the NBA. What are the Trailblazers going to do with that number 3 pick? Because, Greeny, at the end of the season, this is not sources said, this is what I'm hearing. These are from Dame Lillard's own mouth. He is not interested in the Blazers acquiring players that take 2 or 3 years to develop. He wants help right now. Now, he is not saying that if you don't get help right now, I'm leaving, but you don't need a roadmap to figure that out. And their general manager, Joe Cronin, came out and ratified that and said, we need to go forward right now. Whoops. The Blazers jump up in the lottery to number 3. Greeny, do you know who some of the number 3 picks are historically? We're talking about Luka Doncic, Joel Embiid, James Harden, Jaylen-Brown, and Jason Tatum. Both number 3 picks. I don't think they're going to get that kind of value trading this pick. So now the Blazers are like, wait a minute. Maybe we shouldn't trade this number 3 pick. Maybe we should keep this number 3 pick, bring in a player in here that could potentially be a franchise player. So what's Dame going to do? What are they going to do with that number 3 pick? This is one of the biggest things that's hanging over the NBA for the next month. I'm not sure the Celtics would be involved, but I do think a lot of teams are watching. The Blazers have not tipped their hand yet. It's still a mystery. I'm not sure they've figured it out yet.
Once upon a time, the Blazers had the 2nd pick in the draft, and they took Sam Bowie. And the 3rd pick in the draft that year was a fellow you may have heard of. His name was Michael Jordan. What do you think of this? Damian Lillard. Do you think, should teams be knocking each other over, knocking everything in their way over to try and get him this summer?
This is going to be very curious because what is going to be the asking price, right? Like, Dame's contract is not a discount contract by any means, right? And so what is going to happen to your roster if you add a guy like Dame Lillard, right? I think he was hanging out in New York, right? He was at the Brooklyn series. So either of those New York teams hypothetically have no idea if this is under consideration. But Brooklyn in particular, I mean, you got a bunch of different wing pieces. As I understand it, they don't want to move Mikal Bridges. Like, as with any trade, how badly are you going to have to gut your roster to make this guy be a part of this team? And then what does the supporting cast look like, right? No doubt, Dame's a closer, multi-time All-Star, All-NBA. Like, the accolades go on and on. But is it just going to look like Dame and Portland in the Eastern Conference potentially, right? And so I don't know who's best suited. Brooklyn could be kind of curious. They got a bunch of different role guys that I think have value, but you got to find the best fit.
That's one to watch right over my shoulder in Brooklyn behind us. In the meantime, the team that basically